In this hour, we're going to talk more about the chaos at Number 10 and the plotting. I want to know, particularly from you, amid that chaos and plotting, is the answer to replace Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, who did the briefing against Wes Streeting and others, is the answer to replace the Prime Minister himself? And if so, who would you replace him with? But also, is the answer just replacing the whole government? Do we need a general election? No, our constitution wouldn't demand it, even if we did have a new Labour leader and thus a new Prime Minister. But is that what's needed? Give us a call. Tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. I would love to hear your response to that last conversation I say about the tent city and the fact that, you know, someone moves, they can pitch their tent anywhere they want, and if they move their tent even by 2 metres, the whole legal process has to start all over again to remove them. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing. I'm also going to be talking more about the BBC, not just that apology we understand is forthcoming tomorrow to Donald Trump for them basically deliberately manipulating some clips of a speech he made back in ahead of the January 6th riots in 2021. But also, I mean, this is going to blow your mind, because one senior BBC executive apparently actually admitting the broadcaster did make mistakes. I know, I'm as surprised as you did. But this is Richard Burgess, the corporation's Director of News Content. Goodness me, they've got a lot of managers, haven't they? But all on six-figure salaries paid for by you and me, by the way. But he said they have made mistakes in their coverage of transgender issues. He told journalists in an all-staff call yesterday that they must cover the gender debate impartially and consider the views of both sides. Oh, women get a say. How nice. Also, we're going to be talking more about Jeffrey Epstein and the convicted billionaire paedophiles appearing to confirm a photograph of Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, with his arm around Virginia Giuffre was real, like we didn't all think it was real anyway. But in those leaked emails released by US Congress yesterday, the emails also revealed that Andrew told Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, "I can't take any more of this," during investigations into his alleged abuse. Of course, he has always denied everything and then paid the late Virginia Giuffre £12 million, a woman he claims he never met. As we all have done in our time, have we not? Anyway, joining me for the chat all this morning, I'm delighted to say, is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Welcome back again to you.
Thank you.
I think we're still in a bit of shock about the tent city story. There's no doubt at all about that. Before we talk about chaos in Number 10, we must talk about a report that's been released while we've been on air. And this is a report into the horrific murder of the 10-year-old schoolgirl Sarah Sharif. She was murdered by her father, Irfan Sharif, and her stepmother, Binash Batul. They were sentenced to life in prison for her murder last year after subjecting her to years of inconceivable cruelty. She'd been beaten, burned, hooded, strangled, tortured, basically, at her home in Surrey. She was discovered dead in August 2023. Of course, it became a big story in the news, not only just the horrific murder of the child, but also, of course, that the father and stepmother fled the country and fled to Pakistan, where they were eventually arrested. The story was absolutely horrific, and there has been one of these safeguarding reviews. You know, those ones where we learn lessons so these things never happen again. And you'll never guess what? The safeguarding review has found that she was failed by the system. I know, we're all surprised, aren't we? Because once again, a child has been left in a home where she was at risk. Another one of the worrying things, the neighbours of Sarah Sharif did not report concerns about her, that she was being abused, because they were scared of being called racist. I mean, how many times have we heard that? You think the head teacher in Axel Rudakabana in the review of what happened, failing to prevent him being able to murder and attempt to murder all those girls last year. The head teacher basically said he was, he was described him as threatening and like, no, she mustn't describe him because it was playing into racist, memes. The Manchester Arena security guard who stopped that, who saw the bomber, saw Abedi with the rucksack and thought, well, what are you doing here with your big rucksack at a concert with loads of little girls from Ariana Grande, and didn't say anything because he didn't want to be accused of being racist or Islamophobic. So once again, same issues where this wasn't stopped, it wasn't prevented because of PC concerns.
Yeah. Primary school reporter bruising to her face. Social services
started suddenly wearing a headscarf to hide them.
Social services closed the case in 6 days. Now, you can't get any...
They went to the wrong address, apparently.
You can't get any part of the government to conclude anything in 6 days. But apparently... I suppose reading this don't want to sort of rehash all of the horrible things again. I think you summarised them very well.
I think as a parent, there's a lot of this stuff you literally go, I wish I'd not read that.
It is genuinely distressing to read about what happened to this girl even now. And I think that the thing that I've been scanning this story for and I can't see is who's resigned.
Yeah.
Because the BBC, whatever you think of the BBC, two of their very top people resigned because somebody spliced together a video of Donald Trump. Girl got serially tortured and then beaten to death.
Yeah.
And now we have a report saying that actually there were a litany of failures by the social services which meant that they allowed that outcome to happen on their watch.
Yeah.
So who's resigning?
Yeah,
whose
absolutely.
responsibility is that?
Or what's actually changed to mean this wouldn't happen? I mean, again, as you say, they reported bruising on her face. Social services. She was taken out of school. She's suddenly wearing a headscarf. I mean, come on. There were clear signs that any amateur, let alone a professional, would go, something's going wrong here. Basically, they knew that her dad had a history of domestic abuse. There were allegations against the mother as well. The child was taken by the courts away from the mother, even though the father made accusations against the mum against the dad. The child, under no circumstance, should have been left in this home. Full stop, end of, nothing to discuss. Again, for me, any child being taken out of school, there's a giveaway. We know what happened during lockdown when kids weren't able to be in school. We know more children died by being beaten to death by their parents or step-parents during lockdown than died from COVID. Otherwise healthy children. More children died from lockdown than died from COVID, other than children who very sadly were already very unwell or with other diseases. I mean, that's the reality. Children need to have the safety, and I've spoken to so many domestic abuse survivors, children in particular, who say that outlet of going to school, a safe place, and somewhere where someone can spot that you're emaciated, you've got bruises on you where you shouldn't have bruises. They're not, I fell down in the playground bruises, and that things, they can spot that something is going wrong at home.
I mean, look, there are parents who homeschool their children responsibly. I think it's important to say, but you're right. But there is that element that you can't make up, which is that you simply put a child in a place with lots of other children, which is, I think, a good and normal thing for a child growing up, and also just with, as you say, someone who can say, you didn't have those bruises when you went home yesterday. What's going on? But that only really helps if those people feel empowered to act on that information. And we were talking about, you're asking what's changed. I mean, they haven't said what's changed. They're working to implement all local recommendations. But I think the thing is, for things like this, why you want a resignation, it's not vengeance or just getting a scalp. It's because you need that to drive change. Well,
there needs to be a penalty for people who get things wrong. But the trouble is, again, you go back, I'm thinking back to Baby P, Peter Connolly, you go back to so many other cases, Victoria Climbier. I mean, there are so many. I mean, the fact that we know their names, but we don't hear about the cases where social services do step in and the bad things don't happen. But that's we only find out when the children have been killed. We don't find about all the children who are continuing to live that life for years and years and years.
I'm not indicting all of social services.
No, but they are massively overstretched. But also a lot of them are they're now they're under-resourced, overstretched. They've got like a caseload of like 30 kids. They can't visit 30 kids in the week. But they also have this thing where this urge to keep children with their parents at all costs. Well, the only one who pays the cost is the child. And there are too many failing parents. There are too many parents who are on drugs, watching horrific stuff on the internet day in, day out, neglecting their children at best and abusing their children at worst, who have no business having a child in the house. No business at all. But what do you do with the children?
I mean, that brings you on to the shortage of foster parents, of course, the difficulties with the adoption system. I don't know if this is still the case, but historically there was a very big problem with the adoption service having a very strong bias against placing a child with parents who weren't from their sort of racial and religious background. And it's like, I think that kid would probably just like to have loving parents, to be honest, rather than you keeping them in care until you can find one which matches up to their...
But also requiring that anyone who fosters or adopts, you have to give up your job. You literally not allowed to work while doing it, as opposed to actually, well, maybe it would be good for a kid to have a structure of working parent. And
it depends again. That can depend on who especially if it's an older foster child. Often they will have particular needs. But for younger children, parents who have their own children can go and work, and children survive. But I think the thing is, if that was what this report was saying, because I have a lot of sympathy with that argument. These services are overstretched. Social workers, a lot of them are very, very good people doing insanely hard work. We only have to read about this, as you say, when it's in the newspapers. They have to confront stuff like like this every day. If this report was saying that that was the problem, that they were overstretched, that they would, then it would be a very different conversation. But what we're talking about here is a culture fostered by senior leadership in which those actual frontline people didn't feel able to act on information received, and that's what has to change.
That is what's damning, absolutely. Just some breaking news for you. We had an announcement, well, the Telegraph site understands that Sarah Jones, the policing minister, is going to tell the Commons today that the Labour Party is going to scrap police and crime commissioners. It's a big shake-up of policing. They're going to be abolished from 2028 when the current holders come up for election. They'll be replaced by directly elected mayors, their deputies, or by police and crime boards. Now, I mean, I've got no problem with this on the basis that basically, who are we kidding? Who are we kidding? I mean, you know, these were supposed to be people who were going to be representing local people, holding the Met chief and the chief of Liverpool and Manchester, whatever, holding local police chiefs to account and insisting that they, you know, followed the priorities of local people. They've just become sort of political placemen and women. They haven't really done that job. And we've got, in the example of London, you've got Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor, is the police and crime commissioner as well. How's that working out for us?
I mean, I think there is a case for just merging it with the mayoralties, because the mayors at least have some more actual power. I think that police and crime commissioners were not actually in charge of policing. And as you say, they all went native. They would normally end up, if there was some policing scandal, you get the PCC wheeled out to defend, not all of them, but most of them were not defending the police. I think the only actual virtue of them is that that role used to be performed and will be performed again where there's not a mayor, by a board, right?
Yeah.
And the only good thing about a police and crime commissioner is it's one person, and therefore people knew that they were useless. Right?
Yes, exactly.
The boards were just as useless,
and again,
but no one knew about them.
As with all these quangos, unelected, unaccountable, we don't know who they are, and as always, you know, they're appointed from the same group of the great and the good, who have certain views and definitely think that hurty tweets are a bad thing, and you know, people shoplifting, not really such an issue. I mean, that's the problem.
I think this is it, and I think that the thing that police and crime commissioners failed to do is provide a mechanism by which the public can force or try and pressure local police forces to respond to their concerns. And abolishing them because they failed, fine, but that's what we need. We need some other mechanism by which local voters can say,
we just constantly have this ridiculous situation, whether it's in like the health service, whether it's in you know, local authorities or policing, where we just constantly reform this, we change all these structures, but nothing actually changes on the ground. And what people just want is, you know, police officers to arrest people committing crimes. They want, you know, they want the NHS to actually deliver treatment and appointments to people. They want, you know, they just want stuff done that they care about, and that seems to be the one thing that these bodies don't want to do. It is quite extraordinary. Look, let's talk. We need to get back to a bit of Downing Street plotting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories we're talking about. You know, you get to decide what you want to call about 0344 499 1000. But I have been asking you whether amid the chaos and plotting in number 10 is the answer to replace the Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister himself, who with, if so, who with, or the whole government. Let's talk about the runners and riders who do want to become potential leaders. I mean, we know that Wes Streeting would love to be leader. We know that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, considers her chances. Angela Rayner, the former Deputy PM, she's still, you know, hoping. Lucy Powell, the new Deputy Leader, you're not running for that job unless you think you're a player one day. But there's also, you know, talk about, this is extraordinary, that Ed Miliband, the man who is in charge of utterly destroying our economy single-handedly through net zero policies, he rates his chances, and he's been on the new media around this morning, and he's a big, of course not, I've been there, I've been leader. But the reality is he does fancy his chances. He's delusional about his own ability and popularity as much as he is about net zero and climate change hysteria. But he is actually the front runner among Labour Party members. That's how terrifying it is.
Yeah. I think it's Labour list to have a version that they have a Cabinet League table, obviously borrowed, inspired by the famous Conservative Home Cabinet League table back in the day. And Ed Miliband is 20 to 30 points ahead of the second most popular member of the Shadow Cabinet, which is John Healey, the Defence Secretary. I think Bridget Phillipson was third in the most recent one that I saw. So actually, he is the favourite. And there's lots of evidence that Starmer already knows this. You know, Ed Miliband, poor Wes Streeting, tasked with single-handedly fixing the NHS. How much extra capital money does he get from Rachel Reeves? 6 billion. How much money does Ed Miliband get for carbon capture and storage? 22 billion, right? Miliband just refused to be moved during the reshuffle.
Yeah, and was able to refuse.
And was able to refuse, right? So Starmer...
What job would you want him to do?
Well, I'm not... That's a separate question, but the mere fact...
I mean, I wouldn't put him in charge of my bins.
I mean, I think historically, Northern Ireland is the sort of exile place in the cabinet. Unfairly, I think it's a wonderful bit of the world. But nonetheless, the fact that he has the ability to say to the Prime Minister, no, I do not feel like moving from energy, is a real sign that Starmer knows that he's a threat. Right?
Because he's got that backbench support. But he's got that backbench support because they are all also loony lefties.
Well, I think it's also because he's got, and this is, I think, the problem. I don't know why anyone wants to be leader of this government. Like, honestly,
I've got to be honest with you. Like, yeah.
Why? Why do you want it? It's basically stepping into an Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
Because
what do you think you're going to be able to change? But again, even Keir Starmer, like I said after the general election, and before, the inbox doesn't change.
Right. Miliband is popular because in the climate change brief, he is able to do lots of things that Labour members and MPs like, and he's not responsible for anything controversial.
Yeah.
That will stop the moment he becomes Prime Minister.
Well, I mean, everything he does is controversial to anyone who's sane and can do basic maths.
But not inside the Labour Party.
He can be Mr. Cuddly Ed Miliband saving the planet. I mean, a load of abject nonsense, of course. I mean, genuinely, I think the country would collapse within a week of him being leader. I think he's that crazy.
I think the fascinating thing is, Rachel Reeves, we're talking about the absolutely awful budget that's coming up. Rachel Reeves thinking about getting rid of the windfall levy on North Sea oil because it's collapsed revenues, she needs more money. And she's like, oh, I need guarantees that there'll be investment. And the North Sea oil and gas industry is like, well, Ed Miliband is still Energy Secretary. He's still banning us from drilling this stuff, and he's going to be leader.
You and I were just chatting just before the show, and we were talking about sort of, where we are with Downing Street and this plotting that's going on. And you raised the budget and what could be in the budget. Explain to people what you mean about how significant this next budget's going to be in terms of why people at Number 10 might think there would be a threat to the Prime Minister.
Right, so obviously we do not know yet the whole shape of the budget. We know that there's going to be an income tax rise, but we don't know what. And what's one way to try and work out the contents of secret information? How are the people who do know it behaving? Now, Downing Street, Prime Minister's senior advisors, they will know roughly what's going to be in the budget, and they are absolutely convinced that he is going to be challenged. And I think that tells us something very important. When you've got the Prime Minister's advisors fortifying the Bastille and, deploying the National Guard on the streets, you're like, OK, this is probably going to be an absolutely miserable time for the taxpayer.
And that means it's going to be even worse than we think it's going to be.
I mean, probably, yes.
Because I've been of the view that they're sort of, mind you, again, this would be what a competent government would do, is you would basically get, querying the pitch ahead, basically going, oh, it could be a 2p income tax rise, but, and then it ends up being a 1p rise and everyone goes, oh, thank goodness. But you're saying he could even they're basically...
Well, I think one thing
preparing us for the worst.
One thing which will be happening at some point and might have been what precipitated all this is that the OBR is going to give privately its scoring to Rachel Reeves about what she's proposing to do. That might have caused an absolute panic. But think about this: that income tax rise that's been floated, right, would raise $6 billion.
Yeah.
The fiscal black hole, sorry for overusing the term, that Rachel Reeves is trying to close is $30 billion.
Yeah. And I thought it was up to 40 or 50 on some records.
And Labour MPs won't vote for $5 billion of spending cuts. Mm-hmm. So that means that she has to find tens of billions of pounds worth of revenue. Mm. So income tax, more besides. All of it's going to cost.
And there simply aren't enough, and we discussed this on the show many times, there aren't enough very rich people over there to cover all those costs.
Well, the top 10% of income taxpayers already pay like 38% of the entire income tax bill, right?
And also an awful lot of people leaving. I know the most extraordinary number of people who are planning to leave the country.
Well, this is the problem. Once you get to the very top, the bit where the income gets exponential...
They just move to their other home. That's all they do. But also, I mean, younger people who are just sort of starting out and going, well, the quality of life I can have, pay places like Italy and Greece and Portugal, the deal they're offering in terms, often you don't pay any income tax for the first year, and there's a lot of competition out there. There really, really is. We've also got the problem. Wes Streeting should be spending his time dealing with doctor strikes, shouldn't he? Really, we've got that big doctor strike. I always find it extraordinary. The last few strikes we've had by the NHS, doctors, that actually it's not front page news. We've actually gone a whole week of 5-day strikes and barely even touched the subject. People just carry on as they were. Everyone's had so many long waits for appointments, so many cancelled appointments. Yesterday we were told by the chief of the NHS, or the interim chief, you've got to basically carry on and don't cancel all these operations. You know, good luck with that. But actually, there is an element where we're just used to incompetence and long waits in the NHS. No one really notices anymore. Has it lost its power?
It's the boiling frog, isn't it? I mean, NHS not working is now very much the dogs bites man version of this story. But also, every government just walks into the same trap, which is that if you look at the way, you know, think about the big totemic trades union showdowns of the 1980s, right? Thatcher versus the miners, Murdoch versus the print workers, right? In both cases, those leaders were pushing for a fundamental change to how that sector operated that broke the power of the union, right? Unless you're going to do something like that for the NHS, and it would be possible, for example, if you made NHS trusts the legal employers of doctors and nurses, suddenly you could never have another national NHS strike ever again. But unless you're going to do something like that, you do just have to pay the Dane Geld, because ultimately these doctors have enormous leverage that we've given them through the structure of the health service.
Yeah, absolutely.